Please, thank you. Ow.
Right. Okay, hi. Yet again, I think the questions are going to be filled in by the judge. So if anybody's got a question, just put your hand up.
Yes.
Okay, is there anything from the history of Roxy that you would have ever liked to have done? Like anything from past or present of the show? Has anything done that you wish you had done that?
If I understand the question, which I'm not sure I do.
Is there anything that you've ever seen in the show that you said, I wish it like that monster to come back and like carry it?
Ah, right, okay. So you mean stuff out of... this is very slightly unclear question. Do you mean stuff from other shows that weren't my shows?
No, from other eras of Doctor Who.
That is other shows that weren't my shows, isn't it? Hello, Earth 2. Yeah, I've got somebody's out there with me. Ooh, seriously work it. Other monsters from other shows. The one that I remember that scared me most as a kid was those sea devils coming out of the water. And I thought those were one of the things that I just, the strongest memory I think I have of Doctor Who as a kid. And I thought it might have been nice if I bumped into them. But since the only thing that my father kept saying to me was, are you going to do one of those with the Daleks? That was all he was interested in. And I finally got to do that. I think that was quite a buzz.
Was he happy once you'd done the thing?
Yeah, oh yes. He was. And it made me laugh too, because we were in the rehearsal room working with the Daleks, and when we were actually finally filming as well, I just suddenly got the giggles. Because I just like, oh my god, I'm working with a Dalek. This is very funny. And they're like, what's your problem, please, Miss Bryant? And I was like, I'm sorry, you're paying me to work with the Dalek. It's very funny. But anyway, no, I think the Sea Devils were the only thing that I can particularly recall that we'd like to have seen again. Next one,
All right. Next question. This gentleman in front.
How long did the makeup take for Avengers on Paris?
I thought you were referring to me like Worf, you know, how long does it take to do your face, Nicola? Well, you know...
As is the Black and Decker.
Am I getting paranoid or what? Actually, the makeup should have taken longer than it did. I'm sorry, this thing's attacking. Isn't it? Should we move the table?
You can still hear us, can you? There you go.
Okay. The makeup was supposed to happen in like 3 stages, and I'd had a face cast done, which was actually slightly embarrassing because it was the head of the makeup department who had done this face cast. And it's actually, if any of you have ever experienced anything remotely like this, it's quite scary, because they put straws up your nose, and that's the only way you can breathe, and you can't see anything. And of course they did this like complete cast, and I'm like, and it's actually incredibly heavy, because they had to like do a cast on the same line as that wonderful costume I was wearing. And so there was a lot of this plaster of goo sitting on me. And the weight of it is quite immense. And I said, after about 5-10 minutes, because it was like 20 minutes I had it on, which is a long time, I said, you know, I couldn't speak, but it was like getting really heavy, and I was like trying to indicate to somebody that this was really pressing. But they finally got a chair that had a back on it so I could rest my head. When they took the cast off, the makeup artist said to me, oh, you've got a smudge on your nose. So I was like, oh, hello. And the little bone on my nose had like been, all the pressure had gone onto this little one area. And within the 20 minutes that I'd had my cast on, they'd bruised it. And we were like going to be shooting in 2 days' time. This was like the head of the makeup department was now seriously embarrassed. And so that was the beginning of the trauma of that makeup. And then they made, from this mold, they made 3 paper-thin, sort of like flesh beards. I don't know, so it was very strange, suddenly having hair here. I thought, I'm very muscular now. And they put onto these like little skins several different layers. So like the first one had like only like a dozen feathers on it. And then the next one had a few more, and then the final one was like the full one. And then once you put the mask on, they just like covered the edges with like a few extra feathers. Now, it has to be glued on with this quite strong glue. This has got to stay down. You don't really have any air bubbles or anything like that. And it's the same sort of like spirit gum stuff that gentlemen use for their moustaches, which is a very small area, and you go, no, it's not very nice, but all that, but it's like just a tiny area, and you don't do it like 3 times in one day. So they put the first one on, and surprise, surprise, we're always running short of studio time, and they're getting under pressure, and they have to like take this one off, and they get like, it's practically like acetone, you know, the stuff that you take your nail polish off with, to start to edge their way with this brush underneath this face mask to get the glue off. Well, it takes about maybe half an hour to put it on, but maybe another 40 minutes to take it off, because it's actually a longer job to get it off. Well, they took the first one off, and your face is feeling sore and raw, and then they have to put the other one straight on top. So you've got like the second lot of glue now happening on top of where you just had to take all this off. Well, we got to doing the second one, and as we came off the studio floor, the production assistant came up to the makeup artist and said, "We have to shoot this next sequence within half an hour. So you've got to get this one off and the other one on within half an hour." And they loosened the edges, but then they just practically pulled it off my face with almost like, not the skin coming off with it, but certainly feeling very close to that. I mean, it was burnt practically. And then they stuck the other one on for the final scene. Well, my face was absolutely raw by the time I got to take the third one off. And the next day we were shooting outside, and the sun, the minute it hit my skin, which was so raw, just like I had this wonderful red shape of beard across my face, like, you know, razor burn. You know, it was awful. The makeup artist had quite a job. She was that, and she was trying to cover this black speck on my nose. I think I was causing them a lot of problems. But altogether, it was sort of like, roughly, it should have been about 40 minutes to take it off, half an hour to put it on, 45 minutes. But to do the whole thing should have been like 4 or 5 hours, but we did the whole thing in about 2.5 hours, shooting the whole sequence. I wished it had been longer.
Next question. Yes.
Playing Perry, what in all the stories that you did, which one do you think would be your high points, and which ones are you not so happy with?
Right. Did everyone hear the question? Yeah. Okay. I suppose in a way, I was most happy at the beginning when I was doing like Planet of Fire and Caves of Androzani, because I thought there was the beginnings of an interesting character here, and you then imagine a development which didn't really take place within the following season. I think some of the writers like harped on something they thought was very funny, like the language thing and all that kind of bickering, which I think works for a limited period, and then you drop it and you move on to something new. But I really liked the way that Caves came together. I mean, I would love to reshoot it now, and I think I'd probably play it quite differently, but I thought that was a very good story, and I loved the way that Graham gave us all nervous breakdowns and came out with a good show. I enjoyed practically nearly all of Trial of the Time Lord because of the break. Colin and I said, look, when we come back, you're going to have to write things differently, because we want to make it as though they've been together longer and they've matured and they have a different kind of relationship. So that was more the kind of relationship I wanted to sort of work out with the Doctor. But my most disappointing, miserable, anxious-making, pissed-off feeling, was when I was doing Mark of the Rani. I got quite annoyed with parts of that, but the worst of all was Time Lash. I loathed that story, I have to say, because I felt we'd like been stuck in some kind of time warp, because you could have given this script to Tom Baker, and it would have been exactly the same. And I thought it wasn't making any statements about being in the 80s. It was a rather immature young man who'd written the script. I think he was just fulfilling a few fantasies with it, actually. It's like, oh, well, let's just take Harry and tie her up over there for half an hour.
Well, I also wanted to know, one of the episodes, I can't remember which one it is, but you mouth the nasty remark of Colin Baker. Is that your idea?
Do I? Oh, I don't remember. Which one was that? I probably did it frequently.
I can't read that. It was on flow.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it was planned, but which story was it? Oh, you can't remember. On the two doctors. Oh, yes. I think I recall something.
I remember the first time I seen it. She said, what?
I don't remember what I said. I'd have to go back and play that myself, but I'm sure I would have made sure it was reasonably all right. Because when I was growing up as a kid, my mother was deaf. So she couldn't hear what anyone was saying all the time. That makes sense to her, yes. And one of the first shows that she came to see me do, she used to lip read brilliantly. Afterwards we were talking about the show and she said, I thought that was so funny when you guys were walking off stage and you said blah, 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 and I went, that's not in the script. When did I do that? And she went, just when you were going off at the end of the second scene, and I went, oh, she caught my ad-lib. And she thought that was the funniest bit. It was just something that I was like muttering under my breath as I went off stage, and it wasn't particularly, it wasn't like part of the script. It was relevant to the play. It wasn't me, it was the character. But she thought that was the best bit of characterization and the best part of the play. So I've always been terribly aware that when one does do it, that there are people out there who can work out exactly what you're saying. So I'm sure I would have said something that would have been respectable had it been heard, but I don't remember what it was I said. You've got me curious now. I have to play it back.
What do you think of all the other doctors?
What do I think of all the other doctors? Well, starting with Hartnell. Well, I never really saw any of the William Hartnell things. My mother and father were thinking about, getting together, and they might have watched them, but I didn't at the time. Recently, though, they've been showing them again, just like one story from each doctor, and I saw some of them, and I suppose just watching them now, they just seem slow, old. Yeah, it's like watching other, stories from that time. You just think, well, yes, I mean, it's fascinating to see how advanced we were in 1963, but it just sort of like wouldn't hold my attention to sit down and watch it now. Now, Pat Troughton, I thought was absolutely brilliant. I'd never really sat down and watched his either. The first doctor I remember was John Pertwee. And yet when I got to work with him, watching him work, to me, he was in a way kind of the quintessential doctor, in that he wasn't, I imagine that if I was sitting in a restaurant and the doctor was in the restaurant, you wouldn't really notice him at first, because he'd like be taken up and self-absorbed in whatever was going on in his mind and his world and stuff, and he'd be like over in the corner and eating his pasta and working on something and doing something, and then probably suddenly your attention would be drawn to this man because he'd be going, and he'd remember something, and he'd go off and do something, but he wouldn't be somebody that would necessarily command your presence, like, sort of extremely eccentric people sometimes seem very unassuming, but this is my interpretation of it. But I thought Patrick had that really sort of intense, sort of manic quality, but also very sort of warm and vulnerable, and I just thought he was an interesting bundle, I think is the way I would describe him, and I thought his work was lovely. And then of course, obviously I adored John Pertwee because he is my first recollection of, like, Doctor Who's on. And I thought he was wonderful, and I thought Liz Slaton was probably, I think, for me, like the epitome of what a companion should be about, she used to have some appalling lines to say, but she made them really wonderful, like really scary or whatever. It was like, I thought she was brilliant. And I just thought that was sort of my idea of a superb companion. Although I also liked companion Joe. And then there was the Tom Baker era, and I enjoyed Tom Baker's era, but it wasn't the same as like the first Doctor, because I had to go through my first, they reincarnate thing, and get used to having another Doctor. I used to like watching Mary Tam and Louise Jameson. I used to think, why is she wearing that silly costume? And then I expect a lot of people thought that when I started. So things come back to you, don't they? And then I didn't really see much of Peter Davison's Doctor, because I'd sort of like started in drama school myself, and so I wasn't at home when it was on, and so I sort of missed a lot of that. So when I got the part, I suddenly had to sort of like go, oh gosh, I want to see it, you know. Hadn't really seen much of his Doctor, and luckily they did a summer rerun, so that was good, so I got to watch those. And then you know what I think about working with Peter, and you know what I think about working with Colin. And unfortunately, I really haven't seen anything of Sylvester, because I've been too busy myself. Then we did bump into each other at the airport in London last week. What are you doing here? Oh, what are you doing here? I only know him sort of on a sort of slightly social level, and he seems to be a charming man. But I don't really know his Doctor as well as I do the others, so I don't like have a favourite particularly, because they all mean different things to me. But I think it's quite interesting seeing the progression of them. I just want to know who's going to be the next one. It's probably a question we all like to know. Larry?
Yes.
Larry? Are you available for the part?
As long as I don't have to come across it and just break down in slow motion. Oh God, who had the hand up first? We'll start on the left and work our way across.
In your last story, how was it like working with Brian Blessed?
Brian, he was great. He just wanted me to go climbing with him up Mount Everest. I couldn't convince him that it wasn't quite my scene. He was terrific. He was great fun to work with. The interesting thing is that we didn't really know that we were supposed to eventually be married as characters or anything like that, because it was a sort of twist that was put in later, because John had asked me how I wanted my character to go, and I said, well, I don't want to wave goodbye. Bye, Doctor, send your postcard. Like, oh, wow, what an interesting person. Like, you've only changed my whole life, you know. Let's be real here, folks. So I don't want to just like say bye and sort of underplay the situation. And because I couldn't actually imagine being allowed the script that would actually play the real situation, the only alternative I could see would be to get killed. And I liked the idea of it being dramatic, though I didn't know that that was actually what was going to be planned. All I said was, I'd like to go out with a bang, which unfortunately the press got hold of.
Yes, wouldn't we all?
So John said, fine, yes, yeah, okay. And then he came back with this idea about, you know, the mind is blonde and all of that stuff. I said, oh God, yeah, that sounds really exciting. So I said, okay, that sounds good. And we didn't know that the fact that I was going to get killed off was actually going to cause as much stink as it was, because I mean, they got a lot of letters afterwards, and a lot of young people were upset, and the phone lines were blocked to the BBC, you know, I didn't do that to my favourite companion. And all of that, and it's like, oh, whoops, oh dear, what people are upset. And a lot of fans of the show also wrote to me and said, weren't you disgusted about the way you ended? I went, no, it's great. Because I don't see that it's a problem if you kill somebody off, because like all you have to do is go back to last week and you're alive. So, you know, in a time show, it's not a problem about you killed that person off, you can never see them in another show again. I really liked it, but the thing working with Brian is we decided that because of like various scenes, the way they were in, like the scene in the cell, that although we weren't going to play it like we were like to be husband and wife, there was definitely a chemical attraction as far as Yukanos was concerned with Perry, and that Perry really, I think Perry's idea of a nightmare would have been to be married to Nicola. Because, I mean, either she would have to have got it like this, because no more running around, no more wars, none of this, but, you know, because she wouldn't have enjoyed that. Or else she would have to have gone through some major sort of change. Though I think they got on because she like enjoyed explaining things to him about it, and you know, sometimes, you know, when you get really exasperated with people, you just have to turn them around and go, oh my God, it's the way they are, yep, like it or lump it, you know. But we decided we just sort of like pretend there was this sort of like possibility of a relationship. So all I can say is that when we finally found out that we were going to eventually have been married off, we were glad we'd played that. Because otherwise, the terrifying thing is that, like, you know, you're watching the show and then you discover 4 or so episodes later that what's really happened to Perry, she's married Nicolas and gone off somewhere to be Queen of Crontep or something. And I can't imagine. You think, well, they certainly didn't play it like that's what was going to happen, you know. But Brian was really, really good fun to work with. Very enthusiastic man, about as loud as he appeared. It was larger than life fellows, and was just very, very keen that we were going to go mountain climbing together, which makes it sound like something else, but no, it wasn't. He was just like, you've got to go climb a mountain and breathe the air. Very enthusiastic man.
Yes.
Do you think that there was any similarity between you and Perry?
Oh, absolutely none. No, yes, there is. Obviously, there are parts of me. I mean, with any character, if I got to play a serial killer who, like, you know, was the most unpleasant person in the world, there would be a part of me that it was based on. Even if it was just the time that the fact that your dog keeps crapping on the carpet. You just take something that is just like the most minuscule part of yourself and build on that emotion. Kill that dog. Yeah, you are adorable, but I could kill you. So you always have to take some part of yourself, some little seed, and build on that, and hopefully end up with a great tree, but sometimes you don't. And, there are parts of me that were definitely linked with Perry, but I actually did base her on a friend of mine. Yes, we're still friends. Who I was in school with, who was from New York, and her name was Sarah Sonderica, and there was lots of parts of Perry that were very much like Sarah, because their backgrounds were very similar. And when I finally told her, she just couldn't believe it, because she just like started rewatching them and saying, I'm not like that. I think, oh, yes, you are. But yes, I mean, there are definite similarities. I couldn't pinpoint. I suppose the part where at the beginning, the first script I ever read, and I actually read it in audition as well, where Perry turns around and kicks the master back and says, you know, I don't care, I'm Purple and Brown, I'm going to give as good as I'm getting, and all that stuff. There's parts of me that are like that. But there are also, in the very self-same situation, the next day I wouldn't do that, you know. I mean, I wouldn't say that I do that every time. The next day I'd go, oh fine, just kick me, you know. I suppose the adventurous side of Perry was probably the most important side for me. But it's like all the roles, parts of you are in there, some parts are bigger, and I would say maybe like 25% of Perry was me, which is quite a big chunk, really.
When it came to overseas location shooting, where did you prefer Lanzarote or Seville?
Well, other than the things that I was asked to do in Lanzarote, it was probably the most comfortable, in a way, shoot that I had temperature-wise, because it was like in the 70s and I was wearing like cotton shorts, cotton shirt. Oh, this is really comfortable. And that was like, I suppose, probably the only shoot I had that was comfortable for me. Because the next shoot that we went on to, I had the same costume, very smart. And we're filming in Poole, in Devon, and it's below 0, and I got frostbite and pneumonia. And they very kindly gave me a whole day off work to recover. And when I think back through all the shoots, most of the time, whatever I was wearing was either physically uncomfortable or the temperature was uncomfortable. And Seville, I called myself the Kentucky Fried Bacon chicken in that thing, because it's like the material that was used for that little shiny top, which looks very nice, was terribly rough. It was like metallic threads, and it was really, really rough. And of course, being shiny as well, it trapped all the light. It was like all the heat. So I just put it on and baked myself. And people used to make jokes about, do you smell burning flesh? So that, which could have been a more pleasant shoot, was not. And it was about 118 degrees. And of course the makeup artists were going mad. I mean, especially with such like Colin, where this was like giving up to hundreds of pounds of powder were being hurled at his face just before he went on. And if you got any sense, you just said to them, look, I'm going to get a tan before we go out, so don't put anything on. And I'll just like, quick bit of lip gloss, and I'm there, you know. You know, and that was all. Otherwise, if you were just going to try and do proper makeup at 118 degrees, you were going to be in big trouble. And of course, people like, you know, John Stanley were having terrible trouble. So his little Rice Krispies kept coming off. It was quite difficult. But I prefer to be hot. I'd rather fry in bacon foil than freeze, which is what I did most of the time. So Lanzarote would be my ideal situation, to be sort of walking around cotton shirt, cotton shorts, flat shoes, 70 degrees. That's it. That was my idea of, you know, comfortable working.
How did you find working with Sarah, Omara, and Jackson Pierce?
How did I find? Was that the...
And what was your memories being there?
My fond memories? There's an assumption there. I think I can answer this one. How did I find it? How did I find it? Well, I got the map out. I don't think there was anybody that I had any problems with working with in the whole time that I was in Doctor Who, which is amazing. There was one particular actor who will remain nameless who upset a lot of makeup artists and was extremely rude to other people, but he was charming to me. That didn't make him endearing, but I didn't have any problems with him. And I think that there was more sort of stuff going on between Paul and Colin, were sort of like ribbing each other all the time when they were working together. It was quite amusing. But it was, of course, my least favourite story, so I wasn't particularly happy to be filming that particular story. And Paul and I have done several conventions together and had a very nice time. And Jackie is, as you probably, any of you have ever met Jackie Pierce? A wild and crazy kind of girl, you know? Which can be a lot of fun, and she certainly was. Again, very careful. I don't think I can say much more about this. And we got on, and who else was it? And Kate Amara. Oh, Kate Amara practically was the person responsible for converting me to giving up meat, which is quite a while ago. I was quite intimidated about working with Kate O'Mara because she's a very intimidating lady. She's not, as I said earlier, how I imagined the Doctor, being somebody who, like, you wouldn't necessarily notice at first. She is one of those actors who comes into a room and demands to be noticed that they're there. She's not a prima donna or anything like that, but she makes her statement. She is always there, you know, and so we're waiting to film Mark of the Rani, surprise, surprise, in Great Britain. It is pouring with rain, and we are sitting in our caravans, having been there since like 6:30 in the morning, waiting for the rain to stop. And of course, Colin and Kate know each other because they did a television series together before. So they're just like chatting away, and I'm just sitting there very quietly because I feel quite sort of like this woman is like, you speak when you're spoken to. Sort of, and I felt very much sort of like, oh, I'm going to be very quiet here. Yet within like the second day, we were like becoming really, really good friends. But she's just got a sort of, I don't, it's not really particularly cold. It's just a very strong status, and she's like obviously very confident of who she is and what she is. And at first, I found that rather intimidating. So I got my knitting out. But I got on very well with all of them. So I think that answers that question.
Yes. Next. Go. Yeah, over there. I'll get back to you. We'll get back on this side in a minute.
You may, I may not answer it. Oh, that's all right. I don't mind that. I was 17 on the day I started, and my agent had been selling me as something I wasn't, surprise, surprise, and decided that I should be 21, because he thought that was a good age and the character in the show was 21, and so he had sold me as 21. But I probably just had my age. I don't remember. Whatever time of the year it was, I was just about to have my birthday, because it was like October that we started filming, and that was when my birthday was.
Yes.
So like working with Patrick with me, doing Jessica.
Patrick's an absolute gem. He's coming, hello little one, he used to say. He was charming to work with, utterly charming. What else do I say? He's a very nice guy, but it was quite fun to work with somebody in yet again a show that I'd grown up where I wasn't actually allowed to watch the Avengers, but I used to hear the music, and I used to wake up thinking, oh, I wonder what that is, it sounds good. And my sister and I, there was a summer home sometimes that my parents and I used to go to, and our bedroom, the wall was like, it was a bungalow and it was all on one level. We used to put our ears to the wall, both of us like, can you hear what's happening? No? So we had bunk beds then, and we used to both love the sound of that music. I don't know what it was, but it was like, I thought it was terrific music. So I wasn't really allowed to watch the Diana Rigg ones, but I think by the time Joanna Lumley was doing it, then I used to watch them, and I used to really enjoy that show. And so it was quite a kick actually to get to work with Patrick McNee in the end.
Megan said that I read the reviews and the reviews said that the only thing good about it was you wrong with me.
I think, yeah, one of the papers liked me a lot. That was one of the reviews. There were like 22, and maybe there was one that said that. I don't particularly recall. Some people didn't find Patrick McNee as dynamic as he was perhaps like 20 years ago. You know, that was obviously somebody's personal taste, but I can't say what was wrong with Patrick McNee. I wouldn't presume to do that. Okay, next one.
Yes.
How often do you do conventions?
Sorry, what was that?
How often do you do conventions?
Oh, who's asking this question? Can't see the face. Oh, sorry, I'm looking behind because I thought it was your hand that was up. I've seen your hand up. That was freaking me out. God, he's that with his legs.
Anyway.
How often do I do conventions? Not as often as I used to do. Although there's like one every weekend in England, and you could spend your life doing them every weekend. I think you've got to sort of like sort out how many you're going to do. And I think I'm probably doing like 2 in England, 1 in America, and 1 in Canada this year, and that's what I'm going to do. It varies completely. I mean, sometimes I do a ton one year, and sometimes I don't. But I do mostly charity conventions in England because I prefer the way that they work over there. Because I've done a couple of the ones that are supposed to be sort of organised, you know, to give the actors a fee, and they haven't been happy with the way they've been organised. And so it varies a great deal. But this is my second Canadian one, which I think is lovely. And I'm doing 1 in the States in November, and that's it for this year.
Incidentally, that was his question. I was going to ask you later, but I'll ask you later.
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt him.
No, that's right. That's good.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering, what did you do like when you were told that your job was delayed for a year? How did you feel? Did you get out the next season, or did you stop?
How did I feel? With my fingers, yes. Well, obviously, I mean, I was the same as you. I was upset. And no, I couldn't get out. It's a one-way contract. The BBC had the option on me all the way along. You know, and you get 6 pence more every story you stay.
That's going to roll in one place.
No. And so I just went off and I did some theatre because I just like had to do something else during the hiatus, as people call it. But I was furious because scripts were written for the next season, and Eric Saywood and I had got on very well. Eric had talked about writing this really exciting story that never happened, in which I was going to meet the other half of myself, which was going to be the evil side of Perry, and it was like, wow, story for Perry, and all that kind of stuff. So I was sad that none of that sort of got off the ground, and that when we came back, we weren't really able to use the scripts that we'd used before. And I would like to have taken Michael Braid outside and
Showing the evil side of Perry.
yes. Take a look at this, Buster. Yeah.
Just before you went back.
Well, it's not the same as like a regular job. I mean, we knew that if we came back, we would be coming back at this time. So, and I was not actually allowed to do any other work because technically I was under contract still to the BBC. So any job I got was limited in time. You weren't allowed to get anything that lasted longer than like 2.5 months, and you had to get the BBC's permission in order to do it. So I got a play, and so I went to the BBC and said, I would like to do this play, please. And they went, okay, when does it finish? When does it start? And they gave me permission to do that, and you had to do like one thing at a time. And then I did the play, and the play got extended for a month, so I said, please may I stay for another month? Yes, you may. And it was all sort of like, please sir, may I? And so it wasn't a case of me like going out and saying I could do a long-term job anywhere else.
Okay, chat behind.
When it came to shooting and rehearsing, did you find any major differences in the way you worked with Hiatus and Colin Baker?
I suppose the major difference that really developed was that because I got to spend more time with Colin in the end, we got to know each other better. And so I think I was more at ease eventually with Colin than I had been with Peter, because also it was my first job. I was straight out of drama school. He was a very established actor in England, and I was like, so sorry, that really described how I felt. So it was very difficult for me to sort of like actually feel relaxed and be able to sort of like say, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we try that? Whereas with Colin, having worked with him for a longer time, I was more free to like give my opinion about things and work things out with him. If we both had a problem about something, we'd turn around and say, look, we don't think this works. So obviously for me, in a way, I was happier working with Colin and that it became something better than I think I had with Peter.
Why is it that the stories that have been prepared for the season after hiatus, why was it released?
I think they felt because they had to come back with something different, because they had to like, John Nathan Turner definitely felt that there had been a break in the series, and so that ought to be reflected in the stories. And so there was like a different look for Perry and a different feel, and the relationship between the Doctor and Perry had changed. And I think, perhaps rightly so, they felt that that was the right thing to do. I think the only alternative would have been to bring those stories back like later, having done a sort of like, this is how we are now, and like revamp them and bring them back. But of course, I mean, I'd left by then anyway, so the stories became irrelevant. And I think probably it was the best decision, but for me there was an immense sense of frustration because we lost the shoot in Hong Kong. There was a possible shoot going to be there, and we lost a possible shoot in New Orleans, and we lost the, Eric Saywood was going to resign as script editor for 6 weeks to write a story for Perry, and we lost all of those things. And so it was disappointing, to say the least, for me. And the first story was going to be The Toymaker, which I think they released the book or something, yeah. And the actor that they were going to have for that, his name's gone right out of my brain. I'm a big fan of his, so that's really good, isn't it? Forget the name of something you're a big fan of. But probably some of you might even know. That's right. That's right, yeah. Goth. So I was looking forward to doing that one. It sounded like a good story. We're going to go to Blackpool and all that. So, but I think they felt that they had to do an explanation of what the hiatus was.
Yeah, I was just wondering, this has nothing to do with Doctor Who. What kind of advice could you give to somebody who's trying to start out in the industry of TV? I mean, what should they do? Like, how would you get the power of Doctor Who? I mean,
I would say to anybody who wants to do it, don't. And that's honest. Don't. I mean, it depends whether you're talking about in front of the camera or behind the camera.
Either one.
Either one. Well, they're worlds apart. Don't become an actor unless you'll die if you don't. Because if there's any other job you can do it. Because it's going to be too painful if there's any other job you can do. There's no security in it. There's a lot of angst, a lot of pain, a lot of shit. There's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of joy when things are going right too. But don't put yourself through that. If there's any other job in the world that you think you might rather do or you might enjoy, do that. Because it's not worth putting yourself through it unless you're going to die if you don't do it. It's got to be the only thing you want to do. Because otherwise, you'll never get yourself through the bad times. Technically, I think it's a more stable job if you're behind the camera. A lot of people do manage to earn, a permanent living doing stuff like that. And also, you can go out in the evenings and you don't have to worry about what you look like the next thing in the morning. But it's so hard to say. I mean, my only advice is get the technical training that is required. Whatever it is that you want to do, if you want to be an actor, go to a drama school, not just any old drama school, but aim for the best. And just give yourself some kind of qualifications. And if you want to direct, well then start directing little things like, Bill Baggs has put this stuff together, which is like terrific. Whatever it is that you want to do, go out there and do it. And get something behind you, so that you can go to people and say, look, this is what I can do. And that's the best advice I can give you, and good luck.
What is your favorite Doctor Who episode?
What is my favorite Doctor Who episode? What is my least favorite Doctor Who question? Is what is my favorite Doctor Who episode? I don't have one. The bucket of water for the gentleman in the front, please. I don't have one particular favourite. Like I said, I enjoyed the last season because I thought the relationship between the Doctor and Fairy was better. And I loved Caves of Androzani, and I liked the idea of Vengeance on Varus, and I liked the creation of Syl, and I liked working with Graham Harper, and there isn't one. I mean, I just definitely had my least favourite, which was Time Lash. I used to get a sick bag on the plane. Oh, sorry, isn't that?
What's the difference between North American fandom and British fandom?
Well, one talks like this, and the other doesn't, So, I don't think there are a Doctor Who fans who talk like that. There is a Queen. No, the Queen with the, oh dear. I was trying to describe this earlier when I was talking to Colleen. British fans hate me. I think the North American and Canadian fans are more polite. Like may I ask you a personal question, the gentleman says. You wouldn't get the may I, you get, oi, you, now, tell me. I'm doing a lot of people a disservice there, but there are certain people who definitely behave like that. I think it's sort of like, this is our television show, it's made in England, we own you. Come in. And I find it quite refreshing to have the politeness over here. But then I find that on not just the fan level, but on every level. The service industries in England are like shit industries. How appalling can we be to you and make you pay for it? Welcome to London Transport. I mean, you walk into a shop and a lot of times you'll be either totally ignored or else it's, what do you want? Yeah, we got that. No. Do you have any in the back? Or I don't know. Whereas, there's a great deal of criticism of the American, have a nice day, you know, or whatever. And they say, oh, isn't that horrible? It's really phony. So I thought, I would rather be greeted by a phony, have a nice day, or welcome, or enjoy, or whatever, than, would you mind? Yeah, or no, we don't have that. What do you think we are, a shop? You know.
Not a real drink.
And so I think that sort of is like part of the difference, but I think it's a cultural thing as well as just a fan thing.
Okay, yes.
In all honesty, having worked with the BBC, do you think that the show is there for when it actually comes out?
You want me to answer a question in all honesty? Oh, no, you told me that was part of the... Oh, right. I've been making it all up. Right, in all honesty, do I think...
This is your
I can't say, because in all honesty, I don't have a definite opinion that jumps up and says this is definitely what's going to happen. I think I'm probably erring on the side of the BBC. I hope it'll die of slow suffocation, but I don't really know. There might very well, we might be doing a lot of people in the BBC a disservice. There might be a lot of people out there who are actually trying to do something about it. I don't know, I'm not in there. All I know is that I hope that somebody who really loves it, really cares about it, with money and what was the word I was looking for? Other than bless you. With money and ideas, yes, that'll do. It wasn't the one I was going to come up with, but that'll do. You know, somebody who's really got some good ideas will get to the show soon. And hire me. Please.
Oh, yeah, okay. Just to make sure we won't get that confusion again. Okay.
You've got your question now.
Okay.
No, don't have any of those. Sorry, right now.
No questions, right?
This is personal. If you'll brook another personal question. Okay. I was going through the credits for Tomb of the Cybermen, and I hope nobody asked this question before. Anyway, the producer of that show is Peter Bryant. I was wondering if there was a relationship.
No, I met him and he asked me, but... Were you my dad? I'm looking for my dad. No, there's absolutely no relationship at all. Unfortunately, Michael Bryant, the great National Theatre actor, isn't my father either. But I've often contemplated going to his dressing room and saying, hey, wouldn't this be funny if I pretended that you were my father? You know, I mean, the red grey's hot, you know. But no, fortunately or unfortunately, whatever the case may be, my dad was a terrific dad and his name was Dennis and not Peter.
Were you ever confused by the scientific aspects of Dr. Who?
No? Why should I be? Gobbledygook, gobbledygook, gobbledygook. No, I mean, if it didn't make any sense to me, I would send it back. Do you have this plain speak thing?
What?
It's a new thing that they're sort of like trying to do about lawyer gobbledygook. You know, when you get this sort of like 4-page letter which is basically saying, we can sell your house. Well, why did you just say that then? And they started this whole sort of campaign about plain speak as opposed to, you know, unnecessary technical lawyer speak. And if you get some letter that's sort of gobbledygook and you have this little sticker and you go, please send it back to me in English. Which I think is a good campaign. Something is utterly ridiculous. It's actually sort of part of something. I'm sidetracking myself. What was the question? Oh, yes. Sorry. The only thing that I went away to the Star Trek set actually, because when I first, because I got some friends on Star Trek and I've been on their set, and we were discussing the fact that we have very similar gobbledygook. I think it's obviously there is going to be an element of that, but I don't think any of the main pivotal key points of the story didn't make sense, because if they did, they were caught before they actually got in front of us. I mean, it did amuse me, some of the names for various things, but stranger things have happened.
Yes.
Can I ask you first a question?
Well, they say things come in threes, and that's the third and final. Yes.
Sticker.
Yes. Plain speaking. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay, moving on to your personal life.
No.
What kind of music do you enjoy?
Do I write?
No, what kind of music do you enjoy?
Do I enjoy? Oh, it's a bit like me. It depends what kind of mood I'm in. Everything sort of from Beethoven to the blues and all the other B's in the middle, including Bartok and Billy Joel and, you know, whatever. Yes, I love Bach. Yes, I love Bach. I like all different sorts of music. I suppose the only thing I'm not like desperately into is extremely, extremely, extremely heavy metal and the bad rap. You know, that kind of stuff that like is like some old headache that just keeps going on and on and on and on.
Do you like new techno music?
Yeah, the new age stuff, you mean?
New or techno, more industrial dance beat.
Yeah, some of that. I mean, it depends. Like, I wouldn't want to wake up to it. But, I might want to play it at like 11:30 at night if I dance to it and all that kind of stuff. I've been to clubs that do it and the music. And oh dear, that's too risky. No, I like all different sorts of music, but I suppose like my two favourite popular composers, which puts me into a generation, doesn't it? I sort of like Elton John and Billy Joel. I just love their sort of style. But I just like all different types. I even like country music. But it's a bit like me. I like lots of different things and lots of different looks and lots of different feels, and I don't think I'm limited into sort of like having just like one thing that is the be-all and end-all. So I'm a pretty varied and interesting kind of girl.
Next. Yes.
If the BBC asked you to return to Doctor Who, would you?
Yes. For lots of money. No. Sorry, the two sentences don't go together. Yeah, that is my dreams. Yes, I'd love to, and I'd love to go back and play Perry, and I'd love to go back and play some ghastly monster. I'd like to be really, really horrible. I'd like to be bald again, and all that. I'd love to do the show again, and I just think they're missing a big opportunity by not having me there now. But at least I get to do the Miss Brown things, which of course have absolutely nothing to do with Doctor Who.
Question way at the back.
Last one.
Last question. You said that you didn't want to be married off in the series. Were you a little mint when it actually happened in Mind War?
You bet. Not only that, I saw the divorce courts for them 3 weeks later. Or else it was, as I said before, Harry would have to, probably have had serious problems with the mind transplant, or Johannes would have to change into a, very eager to please warrior. Because I don't see that Harry would have enjoyed all that, running around, let's blow up this planet and fight these people, and at the end of my next death I'll be another warrior. There was some major cultural differences there that I think, if neither of them had changed over, I think psychologically. I don't know, I was really pissed off when they married me off, because I didn't think that was the right ending. I liked it just the way it was. I got blown up. Sometimes life is hard.
Well, that's all the time we have for questions. We do have one change in the program. The autograph session that was listed in the program at 7 p.m. will be at 6 p.m. So you might want to make a note of that in your program if you want to get your autographs. And thank you, Nicola, for a fabulous panel.